Hello everyone. Welcome to the Science Grid channel. Let the learning begins.
What is respiration? The sum total of the physical and chemical processes in an organism by which oxygen is conveyed to tissues and cells, and the oxidation products, carbon dioxide and water, are given off. Food molecules absorbed after digestion are taken in, broken down, and the energy freed in the process is used to power the organism's movements and physiological functioning. Respiration is the biochemical process in which the cells of an organism obtain energy by combining oxygen and glucose, resulting in the release of carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. Some common features of respiratory organs. They need large surface area for greater rate of diffusion of respiratory gases. They have thin permeable walls to ensure easy diffusion and exchange of gases. They need extensive blood supply. Respiratory organs are richly supplied with blood vessels for quick transport of gases, gas exchange in plants. Plants obtain the gases they need through their leaves. They require oxygen for respiration and carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. The gases diffuse into the intercellular spaces of the leaf through pores, which are normally on the underside of the leaf, stomata. Process is called diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of a substance from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. The gases diffuse into the intercellular spaces of the leaf through pores, which are normally on the underside of the leaf, stomata. From these spaces they will diffuse into the cells that require them. Direction of diffusion depends on environmental conditions and requirement of the plant. Plant require carbon dioxide given out during respiration is used for photosynthesis. Therefore only oxygen is released, which is a major activity during the day. In night time, only respiration takes place. Therefore only carbon dioxide is released, which is a major activity during the night. Gaseous exchange in animals. In animals, gas exchange follows the same general pattern as in plants. Oxygen and carbon dioxide move by diffusion across moist membranes. In simple animals, the exchange occurs directly with the environment. But with complex animals, such as mammals, the exchange occurs between the environment and the blood. The respiratory system is a biological system consisting of specific organs and structures used for gas exchange in animals and plants. The anatomy and physiology that make this happen varies greatly, depending on the size of the organism, the environment in which it lives and its evolutionary history. Human respiratory system consists of external nostrils, nasal cavity, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. External nostrils. The nasal cavity is a hollow space within the nose and skull that is lined with hairs and mucous membrane. The function of the nasal cavity is to warm, moisturize, and filter air entering the body before it reaches the lungs. Hairs and mucus lining the nasal cavity help to trap dust, mold, pollen and other environmental contaminants before they can reach the inner portions of the trachea, colloquially called the windpipe, is a cartilaginous tube that connects the pharynx and larynx to the lungs, allowing the passage of air, and so is present in almost all air-breathing animals with lungs. The trachea extends from the larynx and branches into the two primary bronchi. The trachea then divides into two smaller tubes called bronchi, one bronchus for each lung. The trachea is composed of about 20 rings of tough cartilage. The back part of each ring is made of muscle and connective tissue. Moist, smooth tissue called mucosa lines the inside of the trachea. The larynx, commonly called the voice box, is an organ in the top of the neck involved in breathing, producing sound and protecting the trachea against food aspiration. The larynx houses the vocal folds, and manipulates pitch and volume, which is essential for phonation. Pharynx, throat. Rings of cartilage present in the throat ensure that the trachea, air passage, does not collapse when there is less air in it. Lungs, present in the thoracic cavity. They are spongy, elastic bags consisting of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. Air reaches to windpipe, which contains rings of cartilage. Rings of cartilage present in the throat ensure that the trachea, air passage, does not collapse when there is less air in it. The lungs are a pair of spongy, air-filled organs located on either side of the chest, thorax. The trachea, windpipe, conducts inhaled air into the lungs through its tubular branches, called bronchi. The bronchi then divide into smaller and smaller branches, bronchioles, finally becoming microscopic. The main function of the lungs is the process of gas exchange called respiration, or breathing. In respiration, oxygen from incoming air enters the blood, and carbon dioxide, a waste gas from the metabolism, leaves the blood. A reduced lung function means that the ability of lungs to exchange gases is reduced. Respiration occurs in two phases. External breathing, which is a mechanical process. Internal, cellular respiration. External respiration occurs in the lungs where oxygen diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses into the alveolar air. Internal respiration occurs in the metabolizing tissues, where oxygen diffuses out of the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the cells. Internal respiration is also called as cellular respiration. It is the metabolic process by which an organism obtains energy through the reaction of oxygen with glucose. Breathing occurs when the contraction or relaxation of muscles around the lungs changes the total volume of air within the air passages, bronchi, bronchioles, inside the lungs. When the volume of the lungs changes, the pressure of the air in the lungs changes in accordance with Boyle's law. If the pressure is greater in the lungs than outside the lungs, then air rushes out. If the opposite occurs, then air rushes in. How inhalation occurs. In order for air to be drawn into the lungs during inhalation, the volume of the thorax must increase. This is brought about due to the contraction of respiratory muscles. The diaphragm contracts and flattens, and the intercostal muscles contract to pull the ribs up and out. The increased volume within the thoracic cavity lowers the pressure within the lungs with respect to the atmospheric pressure. Consequently, air is drawn into the lungs down a pressure gradient. Inhalation is now complete, and the next step is exhalation. The diaphragm relaxes and moves up, and the relaxation of the intercostal muscles moves the ribs in and down. This has the effect of decreasing the volume within the thoracic cavity and increasing the pressure within the lungs with respect to atmospheric pressure. As a result, air moves out of the lungs down a pressure gradient. In unicellular organisms, the exchange of gases takes place by the process of diffusion. Unicellular organisms are usually aquatic, and the surface area of their cell membranes is very large. This enables the cell membrane to facilitate exchange of gases. In diffusion, particles move from higher concentration to lower one. The unicellular organisms use this diffusion to take gases from the environment when needed. When the gas level in the organism is more, it releases the gas into the environment. In animal respiration, as the body size is large, diffusion alone is not enough. Respiratory pigments also required. Respiratory pigment in human beings is hemoglobin, which is present in red blood corpuscles. It has very high affinity for oxygen. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen, so it gets dissolves in blood and is thus transported. Cockroach. A cockroach has small openings on the sides of its body. Other insects also have similar openings. These openings are called spiracles. Insects have a network of air tubes called tracheae for gas exchange. Oxygen-rich air rushes through spiracles into the tracheal tubes, diffuses into the body tissue, and reaches every cell of the body. Similarly, carbon dioxide from the cells goes into the tracheal tubes and moves out through spiracles. These air tubes or tracheae are found only in insects and not in any other group of animals. Earthworm. Earthworms breathe through their skins. The skin of an earthworm feels moist and slimy on touching. Gases can easily pass through them. Though frogs have a pair of lungs like human beings, they can also breathe through their skin, which is moist and slippery. Can we breathe and survive in water? There are many organisms which live in water. How do they breathe underwater? Fish use oxygen dissolved in water. Fish, being an aquatic animal, has a respiratory system that is different from that of animals that live on land. It is capable of breathing underwater without making frequent trips to the surface to breathe air like marine mammals such as the whale. This is due to the fact that fishes have a breathing organ known as gills. This is made up of thin feathery sheets of tissue membrane containing many blood vessels through which oxygen passes, allowing fishes to breathe. Transportation in human beings. Blood is a body fluid in humans and other animals that delivers necessary substances such as nutrients and oxygen to the cells and transports metabolic waste products away from those same cells. In vertebrates, it is composed of blood cells suspended in blood plasma. Components of blood are fluid medium, that is plasma, red blood corpuscles and white blood corpuscles. Platelets suspended in plasma. Plasma transports food, oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogenous wastes, etc. What are the functions of blood? Blood has a number of functions that are central to survival. Remember warn as transport of waste products, defense against infection, transport of respiratory gases, transport of nutrients. The blood vessels are the components of the circulatory system that transport blood throughout the human body. These vessels transport blood cells, nutrients, and oxygen to the tissues of the body. They also take waste and carbon dioxide away from the tissues. They are arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries. The arteries are the blood vessels that deliver oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the tissues of the body. They are thick-walled, deep-seated, carry blood away from the heart. Carry oxygenated blood, and valves are absent. Veins. Veins are blood vessels that carry blood towards the heart. Most veins carry deoxygenated blood from the tissues back to the heart. Exceptions are the pulmonary and umbilical veins, both of which carry oxygenated blood to the heart. They thin-walled, superficial, carry blood to the heart, carry deoxygenated blood, and valves are present. Let us learn about heart. It is a muscular organ, which works as a pump in the circulatory system. It is the size of our fist. It has two sides, which are separated by a partition so that the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood do not get mixed up. It has 4 chambers. 2 upper chambers called atria. 2 lower chambers called ventricles. Working of heart. The human heart works like a pump, sending blood around your body to keep you alive. This blood delivers oxygen and nutrients to all parts of your body, and carries away unwanted carbon dioxide and waste products. Your heart and circulatory system works together to deliver blood to your organs so they can function. Left side. Left atrium relaxes and the oxygenated blood enters it from the lungs through the pulmonary vein. Left atrium contracts and the blood enters the left ventricle through the valve. Left ventricle contracts and the blood is pumped into the largest artery, aorta, and is carried to all parts of the body. Right side. Right atrium relaxes and the deoxygenated blood from the body enters it through superior and inferior vena cava. Right atrium contracts and the blood enters the right ventricle through the valve. Right ventricle contracts and the blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery and is carried to lungs. Remember these things. Valves are unidirectional to prevent the backward flow of blood. Pulmonary vein is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. Aorta is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. Double circulation in man because the blood passes through the heart twice in one complete cycle of the circulation. Higher animals, for example, birds, mammals. Oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood are completely separate for efficient oxygen supply. This is to fulfill higher energy needs and to maintain body temperature. Warm-blooded animals. Amphibians and reptiles. Amphibians and reptiles are both classes of living things that are cold-blooded and have backbones. Amphibians begin life in water and later mature on land. They are cold-blooded vertebrates, consisting mainly of frogs, toads, and salamanders. Reptiles are tetrapod animals in the class Reptilia, comprising today's turtles, crocodilians, snakes, amphibians, lizards, tuatara, and their extinct relatives. Three-chambered heart, 2 atria and 1 ventricle. Blood from the ventricle travels to the lungs and skin where it is oxygenated and also to the body. In the ventricle, deoxygenated and oxygenated blood are mixed before being pumped out of the heart. Have three-chambered heat where little mixing of oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood takes place. Therefore their body temperature varies with the temperature of the environment. Cold-blooded animals. Capillaries are very tiny blood vessels, so small that a single red blood cell can barely fit through them. They help to connect your arteries and veins in addition to facilitating the exchange of certain elements between your blood and tissues. Platelets. Platelets are tiny blood cells that help your body form clots to stop bleeding. If one of your blood vessels gets damaged, it sends out signals to the platelets. The platelets then rush to the site of damage. They form a plug, clot, to fix the damage. What is lymph? Lymph is the fluid that flows through the lymphatic system, a system composed of lymph vessels and intervening lymph nodes whose function, like the venous system, is to return fluid from the tissues to the central circulation. What are the function of lymph? Transportation of digested and absorbed fats from the small intestine. Drains excess fluid from the intercellular spaces back in the blood. Transportation in plants. Plants need less energy needs because they do not move and therefore have a slow transport system. Transportation in plants is an interesting process. It includes the transport of all the nutrients and water to all parts of the plant for its survival. In case of plants, the biggest concern is the transport of water, and it terminates at the limiting factor depending on its growth. To overcome this problem, a tree uses several processes like translocation, storing, absorption and utilization of water. Transport of water takes place by xylem tissue present in roots, stem, leaves and is therefore interconnected. Root cells take up ions from the soil, which creates a concentration difference between root and soil. Column of water therefore rises upwards. In very tall plants, transpiration creates a suction pressure, which pulls the water upwards. Importance of transpiration. It helps in upward movement of water in plants. It regulates the temperature in plants. Transport of food. Food is transported to other parts of the plant through a kind of tubes called phloem. The transport of food from leaves to other parts of a plant is called translocation. The food made by the leaves is in the form of simple sugar. Differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration takes place in presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration takes place in absence of oxygen. End products of aerobic respiration is carbon dioxide and water. End products ethanol and carbon dioxide. More energy is released in aerobic respiration. Less energy is released. Aerobic respiration takes place in cytoplasm and mitochondria. Takes place only in cytoplasm. Complete oxidation of glucose takes place. Incomplete oxidation of glucose takes place. Aerobic respiration occurs in most organisms. It occurs in certain bacteria, yeast and certain tissues of higher organisms. For example, in humans during vigorous exercise, when the demand for oxygen is more than the supply, muscle cells respire anaerobically for some time. Equation of aerobic respiration. Glucose, pyruvate, CO2 plus H2O plus energy. Equation. In yeast. Glucose, pyruvate, ethanol plus H2O plus energy. In muscle cells, glucose, pyruvate, Lactic acid plus energy.